Welcome to Women Deliver Live. I'm so excited to be here. I've seen so many young people, and it's lovely to be here. I have my guests from Kenya and Luthia, and I'm Winfred from Uganda. I want to know more about you. Where are you from?
I'm from Kenya. My name is Evalin Karijo. I'm the project director of Y-Acts at AMREF Health Africa. We have this network of young people advocating for gender equality and sexual and reproductive health and rights in Kenya.
Yes, we're so happy to see all kinds of young people all the way from Kenya, and here we are in Canada. Is it your first time in Canada?
Yes, first time in Canada, but second time at Women Deliver. I think it's so powerful having all these amazing global leaders, young leaders from across the globe, and I think that's what makes Women Deliver really powerful. The diversity that's in the room is really amazing.
Okay. Yes, so it's not just Kenya, we also have Lithuania here. Happy to see you here too.
Really happy to be here. So my name is Eglė, and here today actually I'm speaking not only as a young woman from Lithuania, but also as representative of 1.3 million medical students from all around the world, as the liaison officer for sexual and reproductive health and rights of the International Federation of Medical Student Associations.
Okay, so we've had the talk, gender equality, sexual reproductive health, and on the other side, we're demanding for universal health coverage. But then, like, from your experiences, because you've had like all these huge diverse experiences, you're young people, you're here speaking for other young people. When you look at it with a gender lens, do you think we can have universal health coverage without sexual reproductive health?
No, of course not. I mean, this is the year for universal health coverage. As you know, the global community and the UN will be holding the first high level meeting on universal health coverage later this year. But we cannot achieve universal health coverage without sexual and reproductive health and rights, especially for young people. And where I come from in Kenya, over 70% of the population is below the age of 35, a majority of whom are young women. And the unfortunate thing is that as young people, we bear the brunt of lack of access to sexual and reproductive health and rights information and services. I mean, if you look at the local communities and the young girls, we get about 1 in every 3 girls getting married off before they attain the age of 18. And the unfortunate thing is that they don't have control over their bodies. They cannot make decisions on who they have sex with, who they get married to because they are married off. So without having systems that address these barriers, these gender inequality barriers, barriers to information and services for young girls and women, we cannot achieve universal health coverage. We cannot have affordable care to young people. So we need to be able to address the barriers existing for young women at grassroots level and across the entire globe.
Okay, you know, we are your neighbors in Uganda,
Yeah.
and we've been hearing so much about Kenya, like your
Yeah.
journey towards universal health coverage, and we've been like admiring it. But then, with the journey you've had so far, what has been done in regard to making sure that sexual reproductive health issues are catered for, so you don't have a backlog of coming back to correct past mistakes? How is the journey like in Kenya right now?
The political will is there. I'm sure you've seen our president has been at Women Deliver over the past 2 days, and he's talked about ensuring that young girls, not just young girls, but young girls and boys, have access to education so that they're able to achieve their full potential. He has talked about the fact that Kenya has provided free maternity services, and considering that the population is really young, the biggest beneficiaries are young girls. Universal health coverage is actually one of the big four agenda in Kenya. So the president has big four priority areas. Universal health coverage is one of them. However, as young people, we are still advocating to have sexual and reproductive health and rights included. Because if you look at our benefits package in Kenya, it just talks about mental health, the broader maternal health issues, but then there is no mention of adolescent health. Yet we are the majority of the population. So we are mobilizing grassroots movements led by young people to have a decision-making voice, to be at the decision-making table and to tell the president and all the leaders we need a statement on adolescents' health, especially sexual and reproductive health and rights, so that we're able to achieve universal health coverage in Kenya. So there's political will, but there's still a lot that needs to be done.
Okay, so Eglė, you've heard about Kenya and the journey they've had. But before you tell me the journey your country has had and what you think is being done wrong or right, do you think it's really important to have sexual reproductive health issues factored in universal health coverage?
Yes, definitely. You know, I've been thinking about this, and actually, I would say that in our world that is developing so fast, often words actually have less power than numbers. So I would like to give you actually a few numbers. So first of all, right now, 3.5 billion people all around the world do not have access to essential healthcare services. This is not acceptable. And if we go there through the lens of sexual and reproductive health and rights, I can give you another number. So each year, 22 million unsafe abortions are carried out. 98% of these unsafe abortions are carried out in developing countries. And honestly, this is not acceptable in any way because health is a human right. And not having access to safe abortion, access to health, is a deprivation of these human rights. And I think we will all agree here that there can be no talk about health if we do not include reproductive health.
Yeah.
So therefore, as long as this is considered a human right, we must do all of our best. We must strive all of our efforts to have reproductive health and rights to be included as part of all global commitments that will be made in this year's high-level meeting.
Okay, I'm also happy to know that you're a health practitioner, you're a medical practitioner, and normally we have medical practitioners advocating for themselves, and this topic on universal health coverage is left to the community and the civil society. But then, as a health practitioner, how does lack of universal health coverage even affect like your work environment, affect your performance? How does this really affect your performance as a medical practitioner?
Okay, so in International Federation of Medical Student Associations, we have 1.3 million people who will be one day future healthcare professionals. They will be the ones that will provide the essential services. How does this limit us? Actually, I think many examples can be said, but maybe one thing that I would like to highlight more, that in our federation, we try to take over the problem, and actually we want that members of our federation in the future, they're not only health professionals who can actually provide the services, we also want them to be the leaders in their own communities. So I think that is very important for us, is actually giving them the tools for advocacy. We provide them the advocacy tools, we write our own policies, we try to have our voice heard, because we want these people who will be responsible for the health of so many people in their lives to actually have the skills not only to provide the services but also to talk about it and to advocate it in their own grassroots levels in their local communities.
Okay, back to you.
Yeah.
The policy environment in Kenya, I know it's not very unique from that in Uganda, and the kind of laws, the legal environment, and you want to bring in sexual reproductive health issues of young people in the universal health coverage. I think recently you had like trying to push a law on like the LGBT, and then like you have laws like on abortion, you have laws like on contraception. So how are these going to really make it hard? Or what do you hope to do to make sure that despite the harsh legal environment, we shall have sexual reproductive health rights catered for in the universal health coverage policy?
I know there's still unfinished business in terms of ensuring that we have all the right policies that creates a conducive environment for young girls to access sexual and reproductive health and rights. One of the biggest things we've been fighting for is for comprehensive sexuality education for young girls, to ensure that they have information about their sexuality, about menstrual hygiene, basically the entire life process of young girls. And one of the major challenges we faced is from the religious communities and also various CSOs who don't believe in comprehensive sexuality education. So we've been trying to push for a policy on this. We've made a few gains where we had it included in the curriculum, but unfortunately the name was changed because people felt like young girls should not start being educated on sex. They thought it's bad, and it's very unfortunate that these sociocultural views are still strongly held within our country, and they hinder the advancement of policies. So the name was actually changed to family health education so that some of the things will be pushed down. Some people are really fighting not to have things like contraceptives included in the guidelines for information to young girls, and we had to push back. The good thing is that we've had really strong movements of young people, young women-led organizations coming up and saying, young people are actually sexually active. We cannot continue burying our heads in the sand and saying young people are not having sex. If you look at Kenya, for example, this has really even caused the HIV incidents to be quite high. Over 50% of the new incidents is among adolescents aged between 10 to 24. So we said young girls and even boys need information on their sexuality. So we've been trying to push for policies that ensure that young people have access to information and services on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And we are seeing progress being made, although it's slow. So we are really urging policymakers and governments to do something about this. We want to come up with multi-sectoral action where we get everyone on the table, religious leaders, community leaders, all the movements and the young women-led movements to come together and come up with actionable solutions for young people.
Oh,
Yeah.
Eglė, there's an assumption that the developing countries are doing very okay, and in regard to universal health coverage, the young people are living the life. Tell me about that situation in your country. How is it like?
In Lithuania. It's really difficult to talk about it. In IFMSC, I represent the international community. However, when we talk about Lithuania, and not only Lithuania, let's talk about more countries in general. When talking about sexual and reproductive health and rights, as a young person, for me it is extremely important that our governments recognize our voices as actually people who can give advice, who can actually speak out. Because I really cannot advocate for sexual health if my voice is not recognized, if there is no meaningful youth participation in my country. What does this mean? It means that the governments have to commit. They actually have to create platforms for youth to speak out. They have to, it's necessary to have youth delegates coming to the actually to even in events as Women Deliver, to coming to events such as World Health Assembly to be able to speak out.
Okay. So Uhuru Kenyatta was part of that plenary, and he told us that every school in Kenya or every young girl is able to access free sanitary towels. And there were mamas in the room, in the corridor. Tell me more about that.
One is that we acknowledge the policies are there, and it's a good first step having the president and his government ensuring that there's a policy to ensure that every young girl in school accesses sanitary towels. Now, there's always a difference and disparity in having policies and actually implementing policies. And this is a systemic issue that we need to start addressing at a national level, because the policy is there. But then people are not, in the marginalized regions, they actually don't get some of the sanitary towels. So the whole system of ensuring that resources are allocated to purchase these sanitary towels, that there's a good supply chain system that ensures that the sanitary towels are provided to the most marginalized girls living in the rural areas, living in the pastoral regions, that has to be worked on, because honestly, some have been missing out on sanitary towels. The teachers as well need to be held accountable. I think the accountability structures have not been very tight, and that's why there are loopholes and disparities. Whatever is written on books is not what is happening on the ground. So we really want young people to be the ones keeping the government and even the entire system to account. If you said you're going to provide sanitary towels to all girls, we need to see that there's a proper accountability frameworks, that the numbers are adding up, that resources are actually allocated to ensure that this works. So we'll continue keeping and pushing for accountability so that these policies are implemented as they were supposed to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we left our countries. We came from different places, and we were in Vancouver. We had more than just a plenary. We made friends,
Yeah.
made partnerships. But then there've been like side events. There've been concurrent sessions. Tell me about like your favorites, or like one of those things that you've been part of and you're very happy that you're part of. And maybe when you go back to your home country, there's so much to share and so much to learn from.
On Sunday and Monday, we had the Advocacy Academy. This was geared at building the next generation of advocates, and we had over 100 participants from 49 countries. I think for me that was my best experience, because we got to listen to stories of advocates of different ages from all these countries talking about the amazing work that they're doing. Some advocates are working against harmful practices, issues like female genital mutilation and child marriage. Others are working towards advocating for policies on immigration, others on policies against gender-based violence, others on policies against teen pregnancies, advancing menstrual hygiene. So we had this really diverse group of advocates coming together and learning skills in developing advocacy strategies. mainly on how to get your messages right to policymakers. And this is something that we realized we don't do as advocates because we work so much from our hearts. Like, we have the passion, but then when it comes to skills in packaging our messages and ensuring that they are delivered in the right way to policymakers, that has been a challenge. And everyone in the room agreed, and they said we need these skills. So the 2-day advocacy academy was geared at getting the advocates to learn best skills in advocacy, developing very effective messages, using the power of storytelling. And we had a young girl from India talking about her experience in menstrual hygiene, and she uses poetry. So such things are really powerful tools to get policymakers to listen. And then we also thought about analyzing what interests policymakers. Some just want more votes, so you need to keep checking what exactly is their interest. How do you get them to understand, for example, that investing in sexual and reproductive health and rights for girls ensures that they achieve their full potential, that they're productive, so then they'll be able to live longer and even vote for that policymaker. So connecting all these messages and seeing how they get across to policymakers was one key skill that we learned.
Wow, I think that's awesome because as young people, as youth, so many times we know what we want and like we know how it should be done, but then we don't know how to pass the message across. That's why we've been seen cases whereby our fellow young people have been like arrested because maybe we're not so sure like how to strategically communicate and be able to achieve. So, Eglė, tell me about your favorites or your memorable so far, because we still have so many sessions going on. So tell me about some of those favorite times you had so far.
To be honest, there have been so many amazing moments that I would like to tell you about, but the one thing that I will focus on is actually meaningful youth participation. Because what really surprised me in this conference, that to every panel I've been to, I have seen a young person speaking out. And this is really amazing. This is not something I have seen before in another event of such a level. And there are many events such as World Health Assembly, Commission for the Status of Women, and it is often talked about how youth are important, how they must be involved. But this is actually an example of an event that not only talks, but actually walks the talk. And I'm really, really happy to be here and to get to see all of this.
No doubt, because I was in the youth zone and there were young people of all walks, of all countries, of all status, and there was this continuous discussion. You see very many young people putting up their hands and they want to speak up. That is the kind of power that we young people should keep having and be able to communicate. So before I conclude this, the theme has been the power of. So as young people, you have power, but then to be more specific, how are you going to use your power? Whether it's globally, at national level, how are you going to be able to use your power to make sure that sexual reproductive health issues are catered for in the universal health coverage? You could start with your Eglė.
Okay, so what I would like to promise on behalf of my federation is that we will continue to advocate, to put all of our biggest efforts on every international platform to ensure that the voices of youth are heard. That is the first thing. And the second thing, that SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, is included in all of the important commitments of the upcoming high-level meeting. And I know this is quite broad, however, this is the main focus, and I really hope that we all be able to do our best to achieve this.
Okay, and how do you plan to do that?
As a leader of many youth networks, I'm going to use my power to ensure that young girls have the voice, have the platforms to get into decision-making bodies, and that they have the skills and the required tools and resources to ensure that they're able to advocate for messages around sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality. So I'm going to use my power and positions to ensure that they have these skills and resources and tools right from the grassroots level in Kenya, regionally in Africa, and globally.
Okay, and to you, all our viewers, we look forward to hearing from you in the comment section, and we'll be glad to hear more on how you are engaging your leaders, your community, to make sure sexual reproductive health is catered for in universal health coverage. This was Candid Conversation. I'm happy to say thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.